Can you hear me? No, I'm saying, can you hear me, Sue? Can you hear me? I was asking if you could hear me on the microphone. No. I feel like there's, yeah. All right.
Given Mark 2 legislation too, number 20.
Hi, Ed.
What was that all about?
I don't even know. Never good. Yeah. Goodness gracious. It's last.
So that'll be the last thing we vote on. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yep. Cool.
Are we all ready?
I think so. Can you hit record, please?
Good. Good evening and welcome to the City of Sharonville's council meeting. If everyone would please rise, we're going to have a moment of silent prayer and then Mr. Wilson is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Tankersley?
Here.
Mr. Wilson?
Here.
Mr. Lippert?
Here.
Mr. Duda?
Here.
Mr. Cook?
Here.
Mrs. Knight? Here. Mr. Schmidt?
Approval of the minutes from the September 8th regular council meeting. Were there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, we're going to accept those as written and distributed. Reports and communication, Mayor Hardman.
Thank you. Let me first of all start with the Convention Center information and news.
Hopefully, some of you had the chance over the last 3 Saturdays to visit the convention center for the evenings on the patio. It was a great opportunity for our vendor, our partner over there, Spectra, to get some of their folks to work and in order to invite some of the community in and recoup some expenses for a little bit. So they did a fabulous job. I managed to hit it for 2 Saturday evenings with some friends and guests, and I think everybody had a wonderful time. The food chef did a fantastic job with the food, and the service was great, and the weather couldn't have been better. We had 3 great Saturday nights to do it. So for those of you who were able to do so, thank you for your continued support. The next activity they've got going on is beginning October 18th. Am I getting that date right, Jim? Is they're going to start Sunday brunch. So from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m. At the Sharonville Convention Center, you can get your fill on Sunday brunch. So we invite you all as council members and to the public, we invite you out to just help continue to help our convention center along. On that same note, we've had these conversations before, so I'll kind of make it official. We have put a pause on the expansion of the convention center. We continue to be in discussions with our partners at the county, with the city of Cincinnati and the Convention Facilities Authority in order to extend the financing deadline. That was supposed to happen by the end of this year. We've asked that they grant us the next 12 months till the end of 2021 to do that financing. The hope being that we'll be able to start seeing a turnaround or at least be able to project a turnaround in both our transient occupancy taxes as well as the demand for the convention center and for that expansion by second and the third quarter of 2021, so that by summer of next year, we'll be able to pull the trigger and move forward on that financing so that we can get back into that expansion, which I think is one that we need as a region for the same reasons we needed it a year ago in order to fill in that void that exists between us and the Duke Center. We just know that that demand is not there right now, and our hotels aren't currently putting people into their rooms to help support that project. I do know from the Convention Facilities Authority meeting that took place last Friday that the county transient occupancy tax and our transient occupancy tax should, at least for this year, come in sufficient to cover both the debt for the Duke Center as well as the $1.3 million commitment that the county has toward the city of Sharonville to pay our existing debt on the center. So that's good news because obviously we know that hotels have been devastated by the pandemic, but it looks like, at least for 2020, it looks like our receipts are coming in that will be able to meet those obligations, that we won't have to dip into general fund revenues of either the county or the city of Sharonville in order to continue to support that. Plus, there was and still is a significant amount of funds available in what has always been referred as the waterfall in the way this transient occupancy funding model has worked. So there's a significant amount of funds in there that for the near future could suck up any shortfalls for the financing of these two projects. So we're in okay shape to weather it through, and hopefully we can get back to the premier regional convention and visitors tourism location that Cincinnati region was for the last several years. A couple of notes. Many of you have heard at this point, this came out very late today. There was information with regard to a decision that Duke Energy took with regard to a tree along Kemper Road. So just to clarify what we understand now, I want to thank Councilman Schmidt because I think he was out there speaking to the folks that were actually on the street. Jim was here working with CT and talking to them, as well as talking with Duke and ODOT and trying to put together what had happened. So it is our understanding as it exists right now that, first of all, this was not at all a Sharonville decision. Sharonville did not instruct anyone to cut down anyone's tree along Kemper Road. This was not done to further any project that has been canceled by the city or any future project that we may wish to do. We communicated to the Ohio Department of Transportation back on August the 26th. So shortly after your council meeting. So on August 26th, we communicated to OKI, which was our grant funder, the Ohio Department of Transportation, who was letting out the project, communicating with Duke and other entities that would do any work, that this project was canceled. That was shared with them at that date through us. So that information was out there. That was the information we had. My understanding from Paul, having conversations with folks out at Duke today, the tree was cut down. They were doing routine maintenance trimming with regard to their wires and the like. And this tree was taken down because it was too intertwined with the wires in order to be salvaged. That's the preliminary information. We're going to have some more conversations with Duke tomorrow, I'm sure, to get a better understanding of what miscommunication or non-communication took place. But that's at least my understanding of what happened. I don't know, Paul, did you want to add anything further? Because I'm speaking to what you've communicated. So.
I think we'll find out there are a couple of theories of that, but the one that the pole is going to be replaced, and the resident can speak to that. And the question was whether the tree had to be taken down to replace the pole or if it was coming down as a result of the trimming. So there are two schools of thought on that, and I really didn't go into the detail. But we did speak, and they were going to do no further trees were going to be cut down. They were only going to trim the wires, and they do have that right for that 10-foot clearance versus the wires. And that's where we stood right at this juncture. So we'll hear more of that
Thank
later.
You. Yeah, so like I said, my point is very simple, is that there was no authorization from the city of Sharonville to do that. We didn't communicate with Duke to do that. In fact, our communication to all of our folks that were involved in this project is it was canceled. We are, as you all know, we are looking at and doing designing work for a potential 5-foot sidewalk along that range. That we've had some communications with CT to start that process. As we start getting that information in, as you have requested and as we plan to do, is once we get to a point where we have information that we can share with the residents along Kemper Road, we will be sending out certified letters to all of those residents, inviting them to a public hearing at one of your meetings in order to share that information and get any other feedback that they might have. So that's where that project is. This issue today had nothing to do with us as the city of Sharonville. We did our part as far as communicating as soon as it was there that this project was canceled. So we will be continuing our discussions with ODOT as well as Duke Energy to get a answer in writing, at least, because I think our resident that was affected with this project is owed that as to why this tree was taken down. If it turns out to be what we've heard, then that was a decision they made. And we'll figure out where it goes from there. But it was not a decision that we made as a city, but we certainly will do everything we can to get the answers for why it happened. That's all I have. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the mayor? Seeing none, we'll move on to our Safety Service Director, Mr. Lucas.
Legislation this evening. The first that council is going to be considering is an appropriation amendment, ordinance 2020-30. Scott's here tonight to talk about that.
Good evening. The appropriation ordinance does 4 main things. There is the replacement of a wreck maintenance truck. It appropriates the dollars to buy the replacement truck, along with authorize the disposition of the vehicle lost in the accident, and the authorization to make a new purchase. So the next item is a correction of elected salaries for an underpayment. The third item is to kind of complete the payment of the design work done on the convention center expansion to get it to the point where they were right up to the phase of having it packaged prepared. And the fourth item is to acknowledge, to appoint Jim Doughton as the CARES Act coordinator and discussion of why that is necessary and to appropriation of additional CARES Act dollars for that purpose. We will likely come back at the next council meeting and kind of have a close to a finalized budget for the use of the CARES Act funds and request some appropriations for that as well. Any questions?
Anybody have questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Scott mentioned Jim Doughton's our CARES Act coordinator, and that follows right through into our next ordinance, 2020-31E, which is establishing a small business program, and Jim's here tonight to talk about that.
Good evening, everyone. Ordinance 2020-31E is to establish the creation of a COVID-19 small business relief grant using CARES Act dollars in an effort to provide additional resources to our companies dealing with financial losses due to COVID. The ordinance is being heard as an emergency order due to the very short timeline we have. I believe it's November 20th, where we have to have expenses encumbered. After getting feedback from both the Finance Committee and the Law Committee over the last few weeks, we should have the final application draft to you end of this week or early next week. I think that's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you for taking this on.
Ordinance 2020-32E deals with another grant program. Sarah is here tonight to talk about an electronic vehicle station grant request. Sarah has put in a lot of work with this, and kudos to her for taking this on.
Good evening, members of council. So City of Sharonville is requesting council permission to submit a Volkswagen diesel mitigation fuel grant application for the Ohio EPA to apply for a total of 6 charging stations, which total 3 dual charging port stations, both at the Sharonville Convention Center, which would have 2 charging stations, 4 spaces for electric charging, and 1 charging station downtown in the city of Sharonville. I did ask Jimmy Smith from ChargePoint to be available to answer any questions council may have related to how the EV stations would work. But in applying for the grant, the city would have to provide some match from the Northern Lights TIF district and from the downtown downtown TIF district.
It's not letting me allow him to speak. There he goes. Jimmy?
Hi, everyone. Just got myself off mute. Thank you. Yes, I'm here to I can talk about ChargePoint electric vehicle charging stations or just electric vehicles in general. I wanted to come and offer, to the council to be able to speak and, provide more information or questions you may have. Sarah had asked me just to talk a little bit about like how the station would function with electric vehicle drivers, how they would be able to see the station, be able to find it, use it, interact with it, and that type of thing. So I want to leave this as an open dialogue to you, but I can touch on some of those topics. but electric vehicle charging stations. So it's obviously it's a new and exciting thing that's coming into the to Ohio right now. It's a great opportunity with this grant program that Sarah has been putting together. Well, ChargePoint, we are the network and the manufacturer that Sarah and the city will be going with or have chosen to go with should you be awarded the grant. We are the largest network and manufacturer of electric vehicle charging stations in North America, based out of California with 75,000 places to plug in, over 70% market share. And really have, it's the mobile app that really brings us all together. So, you know, most EV drivers are going to have the ChargePoint app to be able to find your charging station on the map, being able to navigate to it, because that's how people find the charging station. It's no longer that 80-foot billboard off the side of the highway that draws people in. They're now going to be navigating to it, seeing these stations show up on the public map, interacting with them, being able to use them, and then going, you know, to either the convention center or local areas like shops, restaurants, you know, getting cookies and snacks and those types of things, where they'd want to hang out for a good amount of period of time. So you also have the ability to charge people who are using these to recoup some of those electric costs, should you choose. But just more functionality that provides like a lot of flexibility for you guys and how you choose to want to provide this amenity for the city, its residents, and the public that are, you know, stopping in to be able to use it. So that's the short and condensed version of it, but I wanted to more leave it open for you guys if you had questions about how this would work, how I've seen it implemented in other places, or just what are your guys' interests in general.
Does anyone have any questions?
So
Mayor?
just one quick question, Jimmy. Do you have an idea of, obviously we are dealing with the initial installation costs, but do you have an idea of what is the ongoing cost to, assuming that we take on the entire cost for the provision of the electric to one of these stations? Is there an average that one of these stations costs to operate on a yearly basis?
Right. So the a part of this grant is covering those. Like we have a network subscription that goes along with the station, so that's going to be covering you for that 5-year period. We have a service maintenance agreement that's going to be covered for you as well. So what you would be left with is just the cost of electricity and how you should choose to do that. It really depends on the number of people that show up and use it. But I can tell you on just the cost of electricity on average of what you would be looking at is probably about 65 cents an hour worth of electricity. So if, you know, someone shows up and most people only need a charge for like about 2 hours a day. So you could assume that maybe it'd be 1 or 2 people per parking spot per day when it starts picking up. In the beginning, I don't see it being that much. That's why they have this grant program. They're trying to encourage more of that to get out there. To, you know, more charging stations, more people buy the electric cars, being able to, you know, and then you tracking them to come in. So there's a very long-winded answer to really come back to 65 cents an hour, you know, maybe 2 hours per day per parking spot would be a little much in the start, but that gets you $10 a day worth of electricity. But I think that would be probably in year 2 before you kind of see that much activity. So in the beginning, you probably just look at a couple dollars a day and then ramping up to that number later.
That's great, thank you.
I can add to that. So part of our research on filling out the application was we included the energy group, our energy consultants, the utility group, and we asked them to do an electric rate analysis. And they estimated for the convention center, it would be, the number was 2,377, but roughly he said about $3,000 in electric cost.
Per year?
I would assume, but that was the highlighted number. It says a read cycle 18. I would think about a year, but I don't know, to be honest. Yes. Yeah, in law committee, we decided that we would charge a rate that would be similar to the surrounding area. I looked, the closest one was a Liberty Town Center Cheesecake Factory, and it's about $1.98 for a 4-hour charge. So, which would offset the cost of the electricity.
Mr. Pinkersley?
Thank you. Now, as far as the billing goes on this, who would do the billing? Like, say, if somebody was to show up at one of the charging stations, like say at 10 o'clock at night, they check into the hotel, fall asleep, and their car is plugged in all night. How's that going to work?
So Jimmy already touched on it, I think slightly about the pay scale system and being able to charge with the EV stations. But if someone charged their vehicle or had their vehicle plugged in and they exceeded the 4-hour time period, there can be a penalty cost, which they'll get charged for leaving their vehicle charged overnight. So it would, so the actual unit itself will charge you.
Mr. Cook?
Okay, I've got a technical question then, kind of piggybacking on what Mr. Tankersley. Do these shut off? Do they sense when the car battery is full and then just stop?
I'm going to defer to
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I jumped in. Yes, it's just like charging your cell phone, you know, when it gets up to 100%, it just stops charging. You know, then if it drops to 99%, it might go back, you know, and put a little bit more charge in to go back up to 100%. But yes, completely safe. It will, you know, it won't overcharge the car. The car itself is really communication going back and forth between the charger. So we'll leave it at that full 100% without having any complications of going over.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Well, we normally don't let you ask questions at this time. What? I understand. Go ahead while he's on the phone. Go ahead.
This system that they're using is the plug-in system now, right?
Do you want to get his name?
He can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Um,
So the plug-in system, we have to actually get out the hard plug-in.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
a plug-in electric vehicle charging station.
Okay, well, will they have to make it for you in the future that they have to do inductive charging? Where you just drive up and you don't have to go out of your car?
So Jimmy, a member of the public wanted to know if ChargePoint will have the ability to have an inductive charge system where you no longer have to use a plug-in electric.
Good question. I appreciate that one. Yes, at the moment, inductive charging, it is out there. It's available as like an add-on product that people can buy for them cars. But also it is, it's not a universal standard. So there's one standard that you could, you know, all car makers would use. It's like something that you would add on to the vehicle to make it inductive charging. It does have use cases that look very promising, especially, you know, where cars come and park repeatedly, particularly like in the garage, because you're using the same spot. Maybe you got that tennis ball that, you know, touches the windshield, so you know how far up to pull. But at the moment, that's more of just like an aftermarket part that doesn't have a universal standard. So it may be something that ChargePoint does in the future, but at the moment, I just don't. It's not quite mass production.
Ms. Knight?
I just want to make a comment that it's kind of great we're doing this because Ford's coming out with an electric truck. And I think that looks really good that Sharonville's doing this. I know it's not being built in Sharonville, but Sharonville actually has a Ford company and we're doing it. So.
Good. Anyone else?
And to confirm, Jim did look at the analysis, and it is $3,000 a year, roughly.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? Sarah, thank you for all your work on this and all your research and all the meetings that you've been at. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
The next 5 pieces of legislation, and potentially 6 if there's with Mark's add-on, all deal with PACE. financing. Chris Jones is here tonight. Chris is one of the state's leading experts on PACE, so much so that Bricker Neckler hired you about a year or so ago to head up their PACE efforts. In short, 100 E-Business Way is applying for their second PACE project in Sharonville. They did one for lighting back in 2017. This one is an approximately $400,000 project for HVAC improvements. The local administrative body is called an ECID, and that ECID voted on this project last Friday to approve it. So Chris can talk to you about why 5 pieces of legislation are needed to approve these types of projects, along with the business benefits and that type of thing.
Hi, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Again, Chris Jones, and I'm actually back with the Ohio PACE program as the administrator. So I am here representing the program administrator, which again, the ECID is Sharonville plus another handful of jurisdictions around the immediate area. So as Jim said, this is it's actually the second time the particular property owner at this location is utilizing PACE and requesting the PACE special assessment. The property owner also back in 2016, 2017 utilized PACE for their 300 E-Business Way property too. So, so this is the city's now will be the 4th property because the Delta Hotel property utilized it here several months ago. So this will be the 4th one. Yeah, with regards to the amount of legislation, it's just, the way that the Energy Special Improvement District was laid down on the Special Improvement District legislation that had been around in Ohio for decades. And, that portion is what it is. We certainly wish we could shrink that up, but that is the process that every jurisdiction goes through to authorize the special assessment. And I will pause there for any questions.
Does anyone have questions at this point?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, so with regards to, PACE financing, it does have to be for an energy efficiency or renewable energy improvement on the property. And so this one meets that for the heating and cooling systems that are definitely going to save the property owner quite a bit on, their energy consumption. And just wanted to remind those, here listening with regards to really how advantageous PACE can be to the property owner. And this one is a perfect example. Again, the repayment to the property owner is via that special assessment that is, on the tax bill. And so the property owner then doesn't have to go out and tie up, their traditional credit lines. They can keep those credit lines open. And even obviously more crucial in economic times that we're in now and for the foreseeable. So, it's really, again, does have to be for energy efficiency, renewable energy improvements, but from the business case, yes, that is what the offering is to the property owners. We still think it's a very well-kept secret that's there, and we wish all the property owners could know about it, but as time has kind of gone on. The other also business aspect to this that's advantageous for the property owner is that the term of the PACE loan and the repayment can go out as long as the useful life of those improvements. So in this case, the heating cooling systems can get upwards of 20 years. And so it also helps the property owner just on the cash flow, look as well. So there is definitely very strong business reasons why this is advantageous for the property owners, in addition to their energy savings or, if there's solar, involved for renewable energy.
Did anyone have questions? Mr. Lipper?
Just a comment. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to Mrs. Buheit's reading of 6 pieces of legislation.
Which are novels themselves. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you for having me.
There was minor changes to these 5 pieces of legislation. I think the address needed to be corrected along with a date. So these 5 were requesting late delivery for the revised legislation, along with Mark's 6th piece of legislation that he'll talk about right now.
So all 6 pieces were revised?
Mark's original wasn't revised, but that one was delivered in.
Right, I have, yes, but all these others are revised? Okay.
And as a result of those revisions, I was on the email thread between Chris and Margaret, who prepared a lot of this legislation, and they were making changes back and forth. And I had a concern along with Margaret that if they have to make one other typo or cosmetic change, we don't want to have to call a special council meeting and have Terry read all these again. So there was a suggestion that we have a resolution to be read last that says if there's any more minor changes that either Scott or Jim need to make in this legislation, it doesn't affect anything substantial, that they have the ability to do it without reconvening a council meeting. And one of my goals with Terry is to create a title and a piece of legislation that is an incredible tongue twister. I'm going to get it done sometime while I'm law director. It'll happen. That's my goal as
Well,
law
I'm just
director.
going to say that these are like a half a page long. Actually, altogether, it's over a page,
Yes.
so
Yes.
be kind, Mr. Pietmeyer.
One additional comment, we are asking for emergencies for each one of these because the company's would like to close on this with pace October 7th. I think October 7th.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Lucas? Seeing none, I don't really have a report this evening. Our clerk of council, Mrs. Buhite.
I don't have a report either.
Okay, we'll move on to our auditor, Mr. Cunningham.
Evening, everybody. We are 66% through the year, and we have spent in our general fund about 46%. Some of you may be asking, why the difference? Well, part of it, or most of it, is because of transfers out, which we've delayed. We had a large amount of set-asides at the end of last year that enabled us to not do those. And we are contemplating whether or not we should go ahead and do those now because in fear of what might happen in 21. So we want to be ready for that. So even if we do in a tune of about 2.6 million, we will still be probably under expensed on our budget. And because of all that, our general fund working cash is a little higher than it should be. So right now we're in good shape there, but even with that transfer, we'll be higher than our goal. So we're in good shape.
Good, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Cunningham? Seeing none, we'll go on to Mr. Irie, our treasurer.
Evening. Following up on what Mr. Cunningham said, 66% through the year, and according to the information that was passed out by Mr. McKean a couple weeks ago, we not only passed up the 2017 year to date, but also the 2018 year to date in terms of revenue. We've got, and you've seen each month from July, June, July, and August, we've gone down in terms of deficit from 10% to 5.6%, down to in August to 3.3%. So we're slowly been improving month to month. We also note that the revenue in for year to date 2020 actually is outpaced all 4 prior years. And that has to do largely with the fact that July was the pushback for the when the taxes were due, and then August was a 3 payroll month. So the numbers in terms of collections have looked very good through this point in the year. And I would note that all the funds in terms of collection, we've exceeded or we've outpaced this point in the year, the 66%. We've collected more than 60% through August of this year. So again, good news in spite of what's going on.
Great news, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Ivory? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our law director, Mr. Pietmeyer. Thank you. This is an opportunity for residents that wish to be heard. Please come up and give us your name and address. Come ahead. We just need your name and address, ma'am.
Good evening, Alicia Salas, 3850 East Kemper. So I wanted to touch base on the issue with Duke today. So I did speak with the foreman that Mr. Schmidt spoke with this afternoon. While this foreman told me that the tree was in the way of the lines, I wound up speaking to the foreman's director after that, after I sent you guys an email as well. And he did confirm that the reason that the tree was removed was because of the bike path. That was the initiation that required the utility poles to be moved forward, which would have only been because of the bike path. Then I spoke with Stephanie Roberts 5 minutes before this meeting, and she also confirmed that it was due to a lack of communication between Duke and whatever engineers coming from the city of Sharonville that required the bike path and letting them know that it was canceled. So while, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned that this is not on the city of Sharonville, however, the project was initiated by the city of Sharonville, and the lack of communication between Sharonville, the engineers and Duke is a direct result of the project being initiated. Considering how many of the residents on Kemper have communicated at the last main city council meeting about this project, of the lack of communication through the city, through all of the initiative, I would have expected there to be an absolute stronger line of communication, initiation to make sure that communication went from the city of Sharonville all the way through your engineers, all the way to ODOT and all the way to Duke, and to guarantee that communication was a success. And I think the city of Sharonville failed at that again. And that is very frustrating. It's frustrating to lose a tree on that we absolutely love. It was one of the main reasons we purchased our home. While I understand it's in the right of way, we lost a tree for absolutely no reason. And that was because of a lack of communication. And that's not an acceptable response. I think there's a lot that needs to be held accountable from the city going forward. We've already spoken about how that communication can improve. Then I spoke to Mr. Schmidt today, and he did mention, oh, well, the sidewalk has, that's the next plan, which I understand, Mr. Mayor, you did mention. I want to confirm that the plans have not been finalized. You're going over it with your engineers and the project to then have a public hearing, a meeting to the public. Is that what you did state? Okay, just wanted to confirm.
As we promised in our meeting, when we have information to share with you, we have nothing now. I could have a meeting and I could listen to you guys all again, tell us how you don't want the sidewalk, but let us come up with a plan. I believe we were told that we don't have a plan. Well, that's because we changed the plan. We did have a plan. We, as a council, the 7 elected here, voted not to go through with that plan. It did cost us in the long run for not going through with that on other projects that we're probably not going to get awarded grant money for, and that's okay. We stood firm on that. We heard you. We listened. That evening, we heard you. But until I have something concrete to give you, a meeting would be futile. You were all welcome to come to our open, because all of our work sessions are open and they're public. You could have come to that. Anybody on Kemper Road was welcome to come to that meeting. Sharon Woods came to that meeting and spoke. We probably weren't going to go in depth at listening to you guys speak as much because we needed to do some work. We needed to do some talking. We needed to do some internal things that evening also. But it was a public meeting. And you were more than welcome to come. You can come to any of our open meetings. Our law committee meetings are open. Our finance meetings are open. You guys are welcome to any meetings. We don't have private meetings as we were accused of having today. We don't do that.
I don't think I
No, you did not.
Okay.
You did not. But you guys are all welcome at our meetings. I just want to make that very, very clear. You can speak anytime or email us anytime. I am sincerely sorry that you lost that beautiful tree. I saw the picture. I understand they probably, if they were going through because it was in the lines, it wouldn't have been beautiful anymore. because they just hack it. They don't do a nice job. We've had several people complain about that. I don't know the right answer right now because everybody's pointing fingers at everybody, but I can tell you that the people we hire and that we paid for, and that's CT Consultants, they did send out documentation to all the people to let everyone know that project was stopped after our meeting with you. That evening, we did a voice vote to stop that project.
So one of the work order from the tree company, who is a direct hire from Duke,
right,
showed me the work order dated 2 weeks ago.
And we sent our information out over a month ago, assuming that, there was no response, assuming here's your information. No one said that they didn't get it. No, so we're going to work on that to find out where the communication stopped. I can tell you that last Friday, somebody sent out an email. And if it took him over a month to send out an email, shame on him to stop that, because he didn't send out the email till last Friday. So I can see where your documentation for 2 weeks ago, it's a huge problem.
Yeah. I mean,
had he sent it out the day after he got it, it would have stopped the whole thing.
It's a very frustrating situation I mean, I have been on the phone since 9 o'clock this morning.
I understand.
And again, while I understand this was not a City of Sharonville call, it initiated through the choices made by the City of Sharonville. And I'm left, and a lot of the neighbors who saw this, who I spoke with this afternoon, are worried. Well, how can we be, how do we know that there's not going to be this type of mistake in the future with other people's property as well? I mean, we still have 3 trees that, the lineman at Duke said, there's a chance that those 2 trees are going too because of the project. And I'm just like, okay, well, I know the project's not going through. So how do I know that these trees aren't also going to accidentally be removed? I mean, I hear you. I hear that you still are in communications with Duke. I just really want to express how frustrating it is. I mean, I don't know.
I can truly understand. We're all frustrated. We're all frustrated that it happened. We stopped this project. In our minds, this project was not going forward. A sidewalk is going to move forward. That's what their task was giving us now, is some drawings, some things. So then we can talk to you. We can say, hey, can we do this or can we do that? Kind of a thing. Until I have drawings or something a little more concrete to share with you, we can't have that public meeting
that makes sense. And again, part of the information that was shared with me today was that you guys have already made that decision and letters have already been sent out. And I know that I didn't receive it and that none of my neighbors received it. So that was another issue. But you've already addressed that it hasn't.
No, we have not sent any letters out, and I can guarantee you that we are sending out letters certified now. So I make sure you get that letter.
Great.
And we will send you a certified letter when we're ready and able to present a project to you that we're going to move forward with. If we need to, we'll listen. It's, we're not going to not listen to you, but, we will listen at that time. Right now, there's nothing for me to share.
So I want to reiterate one last point, that the information that Mr. Schmidt shared, that the tree was in the way of the line, and that was the reason. It has now been confirmed 2 other times in the last hour and a half that is not the case, that it absolutely was removed due to the plan project.
Okay, again, I'm very sorry that this happened to you, that you woke up and you spent your day working on this. I do apologize.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Cook?
Yeah, once again, my apologies. I can understand your frustration. It's bad enough you're on the phone for hours and then you lose a tree, right? You can't just replant that. I do want to mention a few things. What Mrs. Hoppy stated about the certified letter, we did that, right? And part of that was not only, we're not just going to send you a certified letter anymore, right? We talked about putting some frequently asked questions, okay? So part of it is that we want to ensure that you received it. We also want to ensure that you understand it. So we talked about, we want some type of communication back from you. So then that's our way of auditing that this new process has worked. And if we don't hear back, then we didn't get into depth what we talked about. Okay, do we send another letter? Do we call? We knock on the door? And we need to document that that has been done, right? So it's not just, hey, here's your certified letter and have at it. We need to make sure that it went out. We need to make sure you received it. And then we need to make sure that you understood what was in here. So maybe you can give us a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or hey, I don't know, I need more information. But we're also looking now for feedback from who we sent that to, so that we know, not only did you, we'll know that you received it, right? But we need to know that you understood what was in there,
I
okay?
think that's fantastic. I think that's definitely, as a resident, that's something that I appreciate. I would like to have that type of communication to make sure my voice is heard, to make sure that I am understanding a project that moves forward. So I'm
Right.
happy to hear that that is part of that committee.
And that's one part of the new process. The other thing that came out of everything on Kemper Road is we do have a new oversight committee. It's called Planning Oversight. So we've met, I'm going to have a report here coming out, and it kind of just briefly talked about what we discussed, but part of that is how can we do things better? So we talked about the certified letter. Okay, here's a new process. But we're coming up with some other things, not only to inform us, but to also inform you. So we know pretty much over the years what we'll get asked, and we need to make sure we have that information really available. But I'll cover that in my report. It's not very lengthy, but there is a new committee, and that was a direct result of that. So we can do better.
I think that's great.
Thank
And
you.
it's one of the things that, after the last committee meeting that all the neighbors were at, we had a get together, and that's what we talked about. We like that. If anything came out of it was that a new committee was formed to ensure that anything going forward is going to have a better outreach. So we were very happy to hear of this committee
And
being formed.
as you see, some of our projects start 4 years ago. So for us to remember, or council people change. So it's going to be in one place now. We are going to do better. Instead of getting updates, we'll know exactly, here's where this project started, here's where we're at, and here's where we're going. And we'll be able to follow that progress.
Great.
Instead of our updates from the engineers. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And again, we're sorry. Anyone else this evening? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our council committees. Community Development, Mr. Tinkersley.
Thank you. I've already submitted my monthly report to Ms. Buhite because it was like 5 or 6 pages. So it's already been submitted for her.
Okay, thank you. Community Services, Mr. Lippert.
We're going to meet October 7th, 4 p.m. in the conference room across the hall. Thank you.
Perfect. Budget and Finance, Mr. Cook.
Thank you. I'll start out with budget and finance. The object report summarized the work that was completed on 9/15. The first item we discussed was the proposed TIF Lebanon Road Gateway, what we call anchor properties, right there across the street from Kroger's, the intersection of Field Zertle and 42. So we discussed TIF options for the property in the area. Budget and Finance Committee is recommending this to council. The second item, we discussed the COVID-19 Small Business Relief Program, or the CARES Act. So we reviewed the program requirements and the short schedule to implement, as Mr. Downton has stated. We also discussed multiple options to implement, and I've got the agenda in there. So that would conclude my report for Budget and Finance. Any questions on that? And then I'll move into the Planning Oversight Committee. Okay. So this is to summarize the work complete on 9/22. So at a high level, what we did is, this is our first meeting of a new committee. We went ahead and we all kind of did some opening comments. We reviewed just some basic fundamentals. I'll call it basic project management 101. Then we did some brainstorming, round robin through everyone that was in attendance, of what are our expectations of this committee. Then we also did some brainstorming on the information that we need. We talked about the reporting format, a dashboard, for us, elect and whomever, how we can quickly get that information. We had some concepts there. In addition, we talked about change management. So when things are changed, how can we readily see those changes? And then we went into our next meeting, which I guess I'll go in. We met tonight. We saw a concept of kind of the new dashboard. We're going to give some feedback and work on that. And then our next meeting will be, we're looking for January 19th, 5 to 7 p.m. So that'll give the city administration time to get through the next budget and all that information. That'll give us information or time to see this information. Mr. Lucas, Mr. McKeon will send out that concept. We'd like to reply all, right? And we'll give them feedback. Then I'll give them the opportunity to see what we really need. And then they'll have some options here at the January meeting. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our honored citizens. Mrs. Knight?
Tonight, I am going to honor the VFW. On September 19th, they had a food drive for Sharonville Food Pantry. It was headed up by Robin Rowe and Sean Huber. And I got to read my thumb because they raised over $5,000 in food, baby supplies, cleaning supplies, and personal hygienes. And also they got a $210 in cash donation.
Wow.
So that will go to our Sharonville food pantry.
That's awesome. Thank you. Law and Public Safety, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you. The next Law and Public Safety Committee meeting will be October 6th at 4 p.m. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, let's do this first. Is there a motion to accept late delivery of Resolution 2020 R20E, Resolution 2020 R18E, because there have been changes, Resolution 2020 R19E, Ordinance 2020 33E, Ordinance 2020 34E, Ordinance 2020 35E, because of all the changes. So moved by Mr. Tankersley, second by Mr. Lippert. Any discussion? See none. All those in favor, yes. Yes. Those opposed, no. And that does stand. We will accept late delivery. Rule suspension motion, first and only reading regular legislation, Ordinance 2020-30, 2020-31E, and 2020-32E. First and only reading of our PACE legislation is going to be Ordinance 2020-33E, 2020-34E, 2020-35E, resolutions 2020 R18E, 2020 R19E, and 2020-20E. Is there a motion? So moved by Mr. Tankersley, second by Mr. Schmidt. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none. All those in favor, yes. Yes. Those opposed, no. And those motions pass. We do have no unfinished business, so we'll get right into our new business. Thank you, Mrs. Buhite.
Sure.
Take a drink of water.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. First and only reading of Ordinance 2020-30, amending 2020 appropriations for various funds and authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a contract to purchase a replacement truck and dispose of an excess vehicle.
Is there a motion to pass Ordinance 2020-30? So moved by Mrs. Knight, second by Mr. Lippert. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Tankersley.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Lippert.
Yes.
Mr. Duda.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mrs. Knight.
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt. Ordinance 2020-30 has been approved. A first and only reading of Emergency Ordinance 2020-31E, establishing a COVID-19 Small Business Relief Grant Program.
Is there a motion to pass Ordinance 2020-31E? So moved by Mr. Wilson, second by Mr. Duda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Lippert.
Yes.
Mr. Duda?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes.
And Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Emergency ordinance 2020-31E has been approved. First and only reading of emergency ordinance 2020-32E, authorizing the Safety Service Director to apply for Ohio EPA grants to establish an electric vehicle charging station program within the city of Sharonville and selecting ChargePoint as the preferred vendor for this program.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2020-32E? So moved by Mr. Duda, second by Mr. Cook. Is there any discussion on this? Mr. Lippert?
Just a comment I thought of from Law Committee. So the grants are competitive throughout the state, is my understanding. And basically, one of the comments in the cover memo was that our preference is Chester, but we wanted to go forward with both. We're trying to treat downtown and Chester very well.
Right.
And just that's the way we preference it. Sorry.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. We really want both, but we won't be greedy. All right. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Lippert?
Yes.
Mr. Duda?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes.
And Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Emergency ordinance 2020-32E has been approved. This is just a first reading of resolution 2020-R17E, resolution to appoint a chief executive officer, a chief financial officer, a project manager, to submit a state capital improvement program application to the State District Public Works Integrating Committee and authorizing the execution of an agreement with the Ohio Public Works Commission for the East Kemper Road Improvement Project. That is just a first reading. A first and only reading of resolution 2020-R18E, approving petition for special assessments for special energy improvement projects and plan for public improvements and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass resolution 2020-R18E? So moved by Mr. Wilson, second by Mr. Tankersley. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Lippert?
Yes.
Mr. Duda?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes.
And Mr. Schmidt? Resolution 2020-R18E has been approved. First and only reading of resolution 2020-R19E, approving the necessity of acquiring, constructing, and improving certain public improvements in the city of Sharonville, Ohio, in cooperation with the Suburban Communities Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass resolution 2020-R19E? So moved by Mr. Lippert, second by Mrs. Knight. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Lippert?
Yes.
Mr. Duda?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes.
And Mr. Schmidt? Resolution 2020-R19E has been approved. First and only reading of ordinance 2020-33E, determining to proceed with the acquisition, construction, and improvement of certain public improvements in the city of Sharonville, Ohio, in cooperation with the Suburban Communities Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2020-33E? So moved by Mr. Cook, second by Mr. Schmidt. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Lippert?
Yes.
Mr. Duda?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes.
And Mr. Schmidt? Ordinance 2020-33E has been approved. First and only reading of ordinance 2020-34E, levying special assessments for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, and improving certain public improvements in the city of Sharonville in cooperation with the Suburban Communities Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2020-34E? So moved by Mr. Duda, second by Mr. Cook. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
and Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Ordinance 2020-34E has been approved. Emergency Ordinance 2020-35E, authorizing and approving an energy project cooperative agreement by and among the City of Sharonville, the Deer Park, Loveland, Sharonville, Sycamore Township, Sins Township Energy Special Improvement District, Inc., DBA Suburban Communities Energy Special Improvement District, Inc., Summit Woods 1 LLC, and Greenworks Lending LLC, providing for the financing of the special energy improvement projects in the City of Sharonville, Ohio, authorizing and approving a special assessment agreement by and between the City of Sharonville, the Treasurer of Hamilton County, Ohio, Summit Woods 1 LLC, the Deer Park, Loveland, Sharonville, Sycamore Township, Sims Township Energy Special Improvement District, Inc., DBA Suburban Communities Energy Special Improvement District, Inc., and Greenworks Lending LLC, and declaring an emergency.
Yes. Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2020-35E? So moved by Mr. Wilson, second by Mr. Tankersley. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
and Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Emergency Ordinance 2020-35E has been approved. Emergency, this is a first and only reading of Emergency Resolution 2020-R20E, a resolution authorizing minor changes to PACE documents for Summit Woods Office Park.
Is there a motion to pass resolution 2020-R20E? So moved by Mr. Lippert. Second by Mr. Wilson. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
and Mr. Schmidt. Resolution 2020-R20E has been approved.
Please take a break.
Yay.
Yay.
That was easy.
It's another opportunity now for our residents to be heard. If you would like to be heard, you can come up to the microphone and give us your name and address, please. And there's no one in Zoom, so. Are there any other matters this evening that need to be heard? Is there a motion for adjournment? So moved by Mr. Lippert, second by Mr. Wilson. All those in favor, yes. All those opposed, no. And we do stand adjourned. Thank you.
Will you hit stop on that recorder?